Hello friends, today I would like to talk about a very difficult and sensitive subject, Alzheimer's homes. When is the right time to commit our loved one in an Alzheimer's home? What are the advantages and disadvantages of committing our loved one in a home, and what should we be looking for in an Alzheimer's nursing home? Let's start with the first one. There is no ideal or perfect answer to the question, when is the right time to commit our loved one in an Alzheimer's institution? Because this decision is never easy to make, and it's going to be one of the most difficult and heartbreaking decisions we ever have to make in our entire lives. I know that in many European countries, doctors recommend to families that the patient should be committed rather soon after the diagnosis. In other cases, people prefer to wait until the more advanced stages of the disease when they simply can no longer handle the patient and then commit them into a home. It really depends on the context of each family, on the availability and willingness of the Alzheimer's spouse or of other family members to make this commitment to become the caretaker of an Alzheimer's patient, because this caretaker responsibility is a full-time job. Even in the early or moderate stages of the disease, it's really important to supervise the patient all the time, because you may never know when they reach that stage when they no longer remember how to turn on the gas or when to turn off the gas. They may be going for a walk outside and forget their way home. Spatial disorientation is one of the very early symptoms of Alzheimer's, and this actually happened to me when my mother was in the moderate stage. She actually got lost. She was trying to visit a friend, and that was such a terrifying incident. We were so scared and so afraid we will not be able to find her. So the bottom line is the Alzheimer's patient cannot be left alone. They require non-stop supervision, and this means that a family member, who is usually the spouse, needs to undertake this very challenging commitment of looking after the Alzheimer's patient. I believe that there are advantages and disadvantages in committing a loved one to an Alzheimer's home. When the commitment happens too early, it is quite likely that the patient will go through this phase of anxiety and even depression, because they are taken out of what they are familiar with and what they love, their homes, their families, and they are taken into a completely new and strange environment. And if they are still in the early or moderate stage of the disease, they are pretty aware of what is happening around them. They are conscious of their disease. They miss their families. They are scared because they don't know what is going to happen to them. And I've seen this in nursing homes, people that were committed in very early stages of the disease and who were struggling with anxiety and in some cases even depression. Another major disadvantage of committing your loved one too early in the very moderate stages is that in an Alzheimer's home, usually it is not possible, or it is very difficult to ensure that the patient receives any other kind of treatment other than the usual Alzheimer's drugs. So if you want your loved one to benefit, for example, from an integrative protocol that implies taking certain food supplements, doing physical exercise on a regular basis, of course adapted to the possibility and the needs of the patient, monitoring the sleep routine, performing certain medical tests which are aimed to identify the causes of neurodegeneration and address those causes, having a tailored nutrition, these things will be very unlikely in an Alzheimer's home. So for me, this is a major disadvantage. And the last one is that, from what I've seen, from my experience, and also this is confirmed by various doctors and studies, committing the patient into an Alzheimer's home is likely to accelerate cognitive decline. We would expect things to be different, but we need to bear in mind that Alzheimer's homes are basically rather expensive hotels that offer accommodation for Alzheimer's patients. They are less, let's say, focused on the medical aspect. Other than administering Alzheimer's drug and sedatives, they are not really doing very much to counteract the progression of the cognitive decline. So For me, a major disadvantage is the acceleration of cognitive decline. Why? Because the patient will lose their autonomy. In homes, nurses do not have the time to wait for the patient to get washed, to get dressed, to walk by themselves. They need to do these things very quickly. So they are feeding the patients, they are transporting them, moving them from one place to another in wheeling chairs, because this is more efficient. It saves time for the nurses that have to manage many patients in a limited amount of time. And the other reason is that in homes, they prescribe a lot of sedatives. And even if there are studies and there are neuroscientists and psychiatrists that acknowledge the negative effect of sedatives on the Alzheimer's patients, still this is a very widespread practice. Why? Because it is easier to manage a sedated patient, and sometimes they are not even paying attention to the dosages. They are not interested in determining whether there is something else, a non-medication approach that could be taken in, for example, calming down the patient, taking them for a walk outside, playing some music to them. Again, nurses and the staff of these homes do not have the time and in some cases the willingness to go this extra mile for the patient. So these are the three main disadvantages of committing in an early or moderate stage the patient into a home. They will be very anxious and probably even depressed because they are taken away from their familiar environment and missing their families. Secondly, they will lose their autonomy because the nurses will be doing many of the basic functions for them. And thirdly, the cognitive decline will be accelerated by an excessive and sometimes unsupervised use of the sedatives. Obviously, the advantages of committing a patient into a home when the family has no other possibility, when there is no one who can undertake such a commitment of becoming the caretaker for the patient. A nursing home is a place where you know that the patient will be supervised non-stop, and where they will be fed and they will be washed. So the staff will be taking proper care of the patient. Other than that, I don't see many advantages in committing the patient to an Alzheimer's home. I visited several of them when my mother was in the advanced stage of the disease. For me, it was a heartbreaking experience because but I really do advise you to visit as many nursing homes as possible before making the decision as to what is the right nursing home for your loved one. And now this is actually the third topic that I wanted to speak about in this video. How do we choose a nursing home? Ideally, it should be close to where the family lives so that you can visit the patient as often as possible. And of course, this is ideal, but there are other criteria that need to be fulfilled. First of all, you need to visit the nursing home several times and to witness how the patients are treated. And you also need to have a list of questions that you want to ask the manager of the institution, like how many patients is a single nurse handling? Like, is nutrition tailored to the needs of Alzheimer's patients, or are they just using the services, the catering services of a nearby restaurant, as it happens in many cases? How often do they use sedatives? What is the dosage of the sedatives? Are there alternative approaches to sedatives when they need to calm down the patient? Of course, logistic details like how many patients are accommodated in one single room, this is obviously also important. What is the daily schedule of the patient? Alzheimer's patients require to spend time outside in green spaces, preferably. Ideally, the nursing home should have a garden, and there the patients should be engaged in various physical exercises adapted to their possibility and to their needs. Yoga, a certain type of yoga can be very beneficial, or qigong, or even regular physical exercises at moderate intensity, adapted for the needs of Alzheimer's patients. And one other thing that for me was extremely important: how is the institution, the nursing home, handling medical emergencies or certain medical conditions other than Alzheimer's? Because we need to bear in mind that the Alzheimer's patient is very susceptible to other diseases, not just the main one, which is Alzheimer's. We know that in the advanced stages, they get pneumonia. But there is a host of other diseases that can affect them, and we need to know if the if the nursing home, the Alzheimer's nursing home, has a list of doctors on call that they can reach out to when the patient has not necessarily an emergency, but a medical condition. What I noticed, even in very expensive nursing home all over Europe, they tend to limit their liability, and if the patient develops another medical condition other than Alzheimer's, they call the family, and they basically, if they cannot handle that medical condition by themselves, they ask the family to come and basically take the patient and commit them into a regular hospital, which can be extremely problematic, but this is a topic in itself. So please ask the institution, ask the manager of the institution, do you have doctors on call, doctors that you can reach out to if patients develop other medical conditions? Are you able to administer the required treatment? And also, what happens in case of an emergency? Do you have, like, are you contracting the services of a private ambulance that can come very quickly and take the patient to the hospital? For me, this is like the minimum list of questions that should be addressed to the manager of the Alzheimer's institution. And finally, I would like to say that I fully relate to anyone who is in this situation. For me, committing my mother into an institution was by far one of the most difficult and heartbreaking decisions I ever had to make. But it is a personal decision that belongs to each family. It is beyond the judgment of doctors or any third parties. And I wish you lots of courage and good luck in making this decision. Bye, everyone.